Hello and welcome to Mid-Atlantic Federal Credit Union's Small Business University. My name is Kelly Leonard and I'm your host. Each month we bring the business community together to network, to collaborate, and to share best practices in an effort to stimulate regional economic development. Thank you for joining us on the live stream as well as here in the live studio. Today, we have the honor of hosting our newest elected congressional delegate member, and that's Jamie Raskin. So we are excited to have him here to sort of share with us his vision and his passion for small business and entrepreneurship. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Jamie Raskin.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be with you bright and early here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm eager to get into the dialogue portion of our proceedings, but I have a few thoughts that I wanted to open with. And for those of you that I don't have the pleasure of knowing yet, I am the newly elected member of Congress from the 8th Congressional District in Maryland, which is Montgomery County, minus a couple of places, but it includes Rockville, Wheaton, Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Kensington, Glen Echo, Cabin John, and it goes all the way up into Frederick County, includes all of Frederick County essentially, other than Frederick City, and it also includes parts of Carroll County. So the district is a masterpiece of gerrymandering that somebody drew. So I spend many hours going around all of our district, but it's a great district that has wonderfully well-educated people who are super engaged in the community, and tons of small businesses that engage in everything from traditional small business stuff to a lot of small businesses that are related in some sense to the federal government work and procurement and contracting work. So I have just completed a decade as the state senator for District 20, which is Silver Spring and Tacoma Park. And I thought I would start by way of introduction by giving you a sense of some of the small business initiatives that I've been engaged in, which I think illuminate a bit what my philosophy of small business is. I do believe that small business is and ought to be the lifeblood of the American economy. I know that 2/3 of new jobs are generated by small businesses in the country, and I believe that far too often the rules that govern government procurement, requisition, contracting are skewed towards larger businesses that make it much tougher for smaller businesses to get in the game. And I think that the role of government should be to try to champion the ability of small businesses to form. And so let me just give you a couple examples of the sorts of things that I've worked on. When I first got elected to the state senate back in 2006, I started hearing from constituents that they were not able to have wine shipped into them in the state. And also I started hearing from small business wineries, which is a burgeoning industry in our state, that they were not able to ship wine out of the state because we had basically protectionist rules that made us one of only 4 or 5 states in the country that forbade the interstate shipment of wine. And under this Granholm decision by the Supreme Court, if you don't allow wine to be shipped in, then you can't have wine shipped out, essentially. So I said that didn't make any sense. That violated essential free market principles, and I wanted to introduce legislation to deregulate, to allow for the free shipment of wine. People told me, don't do that. The leadership doesn't like it. That's when I first learned that leadership or the people don't want you to do anything. But I went ahead and I introduced it. I had a few other liberal Democrats like me and some libertarian Republicans. And the first year it didn't really go anywhere. But the second year we doubled the number of members who were interested. And by the third year we put it in, we had dozens of co-sponsors. We had wine tastings and rallies going on around the state, and we had a big push to allow for the deregulation of wine shipment. And sure enough, we were able to get that through, and we were able to join the states that allow for the free shipment of wine, which is obviously good for consumers, and it's good for the small businesses that are in the industry. So if you don't remember anything else about me, remember I'm the guy who brought you direct wine shipment in the state of Maryland. But I also have been very interested in the processes of capital formation. How do small businesses actually get enough money to launch? I mean, it takes money, obviously, to invest, to kick off a new entrepreneurial idea and project and venture. And after the mortgage meltdown crisis, the Wall Street crash of 2008, it became much tougher for people to get loans from private banks, and at the same time there was less government money available. So I introduced legislation which was drawn to contour the federal securities laws to say that the small businesses in Maryland could raise up to $100,000 without being governed by either federal or state securities laws. You could get up to 1,000 contributions of $100 or less, and you could do it on the internet from Maryland's own citizens, or you could do it directly. But this is a way that small businesses could actually collect enough money to kick off in order to raise more money, or to, just to get the business going and to get an income stream coming in. And I've heard from lots of small businesses that found that indispensable for their kickoff, and I'm excited about that, and always interested in thinking of ways for smaller businesses to get the money that they need. The final thing that I want to mention that I worked on in Annapolis was I introduced the first benefit corporation law in America. And I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the benefit corporations, but it's now been adopted by a majority of the states, including Delaware, which of course is the place where lots of businesses like to go to incorporate. But I'd like to say that Maryland is the Delaware of benefit corporations because we started it. And a benefit corporation is a for-profit business that also wants to designate as part of its corporate charter that it has a social purpose in addition to the profit-making purpose. So some of them have said that they want to work on the cleanup of a local stream as part of their pro bono activity. The very first benefit corporation to register on Earth is called the Big Bad Wolf, which is a pet store that sells pet supplies. But on the weekend, they do animal adoptions and rescues as a pro bono effort, and that's built into their charter. So the benefit corporation designation it becomes a signal to consumers and employees and potential investors that you are a company that's not planning to take the money and run off to the Bimini Islands or something, but you're invested in the community and you understand that you've got a social commitment to the place where you operate and the place where the owners and the employees live. So I'm proud of the fact that we've got hundreds of benefit corporations. The B Corp movement nationally or internationally now has hundreds of millions of dollars. It's probably even billions of dollars now invested in it. And there are networks of the benefit corporations that are trying to help each other. And there are opportunities for benefit corporations to get loans from people who are interested in investing in them. And so that's helped to give some life to the vibrant green businesses that we've got here in Maryland, the Bethesda Green movement, the Silver Spring Green, Wheaton Green. There are a bunch of networks of green enterprises that are working on solar energy and wind energy and other alternatives like that. So as a member of Congress, I would hope to continue to champion these kinds of efforts, creating the space for the small businesses to have a place at the table when it comes to federal as well as state and local government procurement and contracting. I would hope to engage in prudent deregulation in places where red tape is preventing small businesses from forming and being active participants in the economy. I believe that small businesses are civically engaged and patriotic and don't mind paying their fair share of the taxes. But I think what most small businesses can't stand is the tax on time that is imposed by so much regulatory compliance work. And that's really where I think we need to untangle the red tape. We should try to reduce as much as possible the amount of time that small businesses have to engage in that. It's true that the big corporations can afford to have an army of lawyers and compliance specialists who can spend all their time filling out all of the forms, but that's not true of the small businesses that are still engaged in the vibrant period of development of their businesses. And so we have to be very attentive to the imposition of onerous regulatory requirements and compliance requirements on people. And with that, I'll just say, my door is always open to the small businesses of Montgomery, Frederick, and Carroll County. I'm delighted to represent people who are very entrepreneurial and creative and inventive in what they're doing. And I hope to be able to facilitate the growth and the creation of small businesses throughout our area. And with that, the floor is open for questions. Please. And I think you're supposed to identify yourself.
I will identify myself.
Okay.
My name is Mark Avalon. I'm president of Potomac Wealth Advisors. Congratulations on your victory.
Thank you, Mark.
My question is, the president-elect has repeatedly said he is in favor of a huge infrastructure spending bill. That's historically been something Democrats have supported.
Yes.
Do you expect that Democrats will continue to support this, or is the fact that it's coming from a Republican president going to slow that down or change it in any way?
I believe that infrastructure provides the best promise for us that we will have bipartisan action at the beginning of the new year. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump campaigned on infrastructure investment, and I campaigned on it because the infrastructure is ailing. The roads and the highways here, 270 and 70, need serious work and expansion. Our metro system, which used to be the jewel of the region, is hurting badly. And when I was a kid, I used to go on the metro and just travel and look around. It opened up worlds for me. I got to go to the museums and the federal buildings. I went to dances and parties. I met my first girlfriend on the metro. The metro was a masterpiece, and today it's sad it can barely get people to work on time. I want to take the Red Line to Capitol Hill, but I'm afraid I'm going to miss my first votes because I'm going to be stuck on the metro. That can't be right. I mean, this is the capital of the free world and a great metropolitan region. We've got to have a metro system that is befitting one of the world's great metropolitan regions, and it's got to work, which means we've got to invest in it. And so I will be a champion for federal investment in the metro. We've got a great new general manager who's working really hard to put things together, and we've got to get behind that effort. So I think that the potential is there for a great bipartisan compromise on it. I know that there are members of the Tea Party movement who are totally opposed to infrastructure, but on the Democratic Party side, we are not afraid of public investment. We think that public investment has been the spur to economic growth at every major juncture in American history. And it was our party that looked at the Great Depression and said, we need a new deal. We need to invest in America. And we still live with a lot of the great projects that began during that time. But Republicans have done it too. President Eisenhower was behind the National Defense Highway Act, which is what built the highway infrastructure, which was a huge spur and incentive, obviously, to the automobile industry, but also growth and suburbanization in the country. So I think that the grounds are there for a real compromise. Now, I know that the initial plan that was suggested by the Trump people was not a real investment plan, but it was just tax breaks for certain favored entities. And that's not going to be enough for us, obviously. We don't think that that's a real infrastructure plan, but I think it's a fine way to begin the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning,
Good
David.
morning. I'm Dave Lockwood. I'm president of Strategy Management Incorporated. Congratulations, Jamie, on your election. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you much.
Do Democrats have a vision to improve the economic future of average working class Americans?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think that the best traditions in our party are to fight for the great American middle class, which we hope will include everybody. This is why, you know, curiously, I think that the single best thing we could do if we had the political will to do it, to help the small business sector, would be to provide for national universal health care, the kind that they've got in Canada or France, and remove the burden from small businesses to provide health insurance for their people. Because that, you know, for, again, a big business can afford the health insurance, and for a small business it becomes, you know, a staggering burden where you're just trying to make ends meet on a monthly basis. Why is that a responsibility that should be imposed on small businesses? In a civilized society, we would view health insurance as something that everybody gets by virtue of belonging, and that's the way it operates in Europe and Canada and Mexico and around the world. So obviously we're far from that. In some sense, the incoming administration says they want to turn the clock back on Obamacare, and maybe that relieves the burden in some way from small businesses, but people still need health insurance and they still need health care. So I don't know ultimately if that really helps small businesses. What helps is to create a society that provides for the basic minimums that people need in stuff, and then the small businesses can go about doing whatever their business is and not have to be in the business of healthcare. So I hope that that's the kind of vision that my party will bring, and I hope that the Democratic Party will continue to be the party of small business. It's clear that the larger businesses and the billionaires are going to be well represented in the Trump cabinet, and I hope that we can stand for the small businesses.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks so much.
Good morning, and congratulations on your winning.
Thank you much.
Ashoka Patel from Hawkeye Medical. We are a medical equipment supply company. We are trying to start an export division, but we see a great growth opportunity for my company to export medical supplies overseas. And I wanted to find out how you and your cohorts in Congress would keep the free zones, trade-free zones, and tariff-free zones tariff-free, and actually help American companies export supplies overseas so we can be competitive with other European countries and other countries that don't have tariffs to enter foreign markets.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And you know, as a Democrat, I favor free and fair trade. You know, this was the great liberal promise of the 18th century, you know, that Adam Smith and John Locke and David Hume and, you know, all those philosophers talked about. Free trade was supposed to be the antidote to war and mercantilism. Instead of every country viewing every other country as an enemy, that either in military terms or economic terms, the idea is that we would use trade to open the world up, and it would be an uplifting process for everybody, and it would tame our, you know, savage lust for war and blood and so on, just to allow people to engage in commerce across country lines. I think that there's still a lot of strength to that vision. Obviously, what we've gone through is a political process, interestingly, now both on the Democratic and Republican sides, where we've come to the conclusion that we have to make sure that trade takes place in a way that it doesn't undermine the environmental and labor and regulatory standards that the societies have arrived at. But I think that's perfectly consistent with having a free trade agenda. You have a free trade regime that's based on lifting everybody up rather than a race to the bottom. The problem, the political problem I see is this. And Donald Trump expertly manipulated people's anxiety economic anxieties in the country and basically blamed it on trade, and has engaged in very strong protectionist and kind of xenophobic rhetoric, and anti-immigrant rhetoric, of course, over the course of this campaign. Here's the real problem. A lot of people are being displaced in the workforce not by trade, but by automation and by mechanization. That's the real unspoken economic reality. And which party has an agenda for that? Neither party really has an agenda to address that. I mean, Donald Trump, he has an opportunistic agenda, which is scapegoat. Your problems are people who don't look like you. Your problem is people who don't speak like you. Your problem is women, and so on and so forth. Well, that obviously is a dangerous and cynical and counterproductive agenda for a democratic society. What do we have on the Democratic side? I'm afraid to say we don't have an answer for that problem, right? Because the rate of technological change and automation is so remarkable that lots of people are who have spent their lives in particular sectors and jobs are just without those jobs now. They're gone. You know, I spent some time earlier in my campaign for Congress with the president of the Steelworkers of Maryland, and I said, you know, what was the peak membership of the Steelworkers Union? Well, in the 1970s, he said it was around 170,000 people. What's the membership today? Around 2,000 people. Wow. You know, those were good middle-class jobs where people could have health care and go on vacation for a few weeks and have a car in the garage and so on. Those jobs are gone, and we've seen that in a lot of different processes. And it's not just that they're going overseas, which they have in some cases, but it's just that even if they were all to come back, the automation is such that we're not going to be able to provide lots of jobs for those people. And that's the untold story of what's happened in Baltimore and the riots in Baltimore. Where is the economic hope for people? That, to me, is the real challenge for our party. Because I think that what you can say for the Democrats is we do have a commitment to the middle class and making sure that we build an economy that everybody can participate in. We really do. It's not just for billionaires and the CEOs of the biggest corporations. It's for everybody. It's for small businesses. It's for workers. It's for people who are struggling to get into the middle class and recent immigrants to the country. So we've got to figure out that problem. That's a tough problem. And that goes way beyond the cosmetic political issue of, well, how do we tweak the message? Or how do we try to touch this group or that group? That's a structural economic problem. We've got to be serious about it and bring the best wisdom and expertise we can find to deal with it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Hi, good morning. Monica Kosta. I'm with the Will Niacato, the only black woman owned in Montgomery County.
The only
auto repair.
city.
Only black woman owned auto repair.
Auto repair? Oh,
and
wonderful.
auto body. Yeah, so I understand what you were just talking about. So congratulations as far as being industrials and, you know, getting welders and the technological people out and maintain it and even inspire the new generation to go into those jobs.
Yes, indeed.
Because, you know, there's like the huge number of the ones that said, don't go into that direction because it's not worth it. And my question is also securing that, is that how do you see also helping the small business securing a space when you see, you know, like Montgomery County or so many other places growing and growing, but not necessarily with bigger corporations,
Yeah.
but not as much with the small business, like, for example, myself, to secure a storefront location. So what are your plans on targeting also the fairness and share of the storefront areas of
Yeah.
Montgomery County, Maryland, and
Well, I mean, that's an awesome question. I mean, to me, that is the question, which is how do we make sure at every level of government we're incorporating a small business ethos? Because really, in a democracy, it is the small business class that is the way for people to get into middle class life and to have a steady source of livelihood and income, because the big corporations simply are not going to employ the vast majority of people in the country. So, I wish that there were one or two answers that would respond to the challenge there. All I can say is we need, in the political realm, to be incorporating this consciousness of the importance of small business. So, at the level of the county council, they've got to be asking the question, how do our rules on zoning and contracting and so on affect small businesses? And at the level of the U.S. Congress, what are we doing, to strengthen and bolster the Small Business Administration and to make loans available to small businesses that don't have them now? What can we do to make sure that the federal procurement and contracting process is not dominated by large actors that get the rules written in such a way as to favor the economic incumbents as opposed to the new people who are just trying to break into it? And those are the kinds of things that we need to do. But I talk to small businesses all the time. I've never heard from anybody, here is the one thing that is going to change the whole mentality. That's why what we need to do is to make sure that at every level of government, we're incorporating this ethic.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Good morning and congratulations. I'm Richard Turner, small business consultant on information communications technologies in Rockville, but also, a little bit more importantly, now executive director of the Community Media Center in Carroll County, where I have an interest in what the federal government is going to do with respect to increasing the opportunities for broadband and connectivity in rural communities. This is an area, in terms of economic development, social civic engagement, et cetera, that really has an impact as we see with the potential and changes of the way in which we do business and the importance of broadband technologies being made available. And the rural communities continue to have little opportunities with respect to those technologies. So I'm wondering if there's anything.
Absolutely. I was meeting people in my campaign in Carroll County who basically had to go to libraries or libraries in other counties in order to get internet access. I view that as an essential part of an infrastructure plan moving forward. It is the roads, it's the highways, it's the metro system, it's the transportation infrastructure, it's the water systems, it's the port system, it's cybersecurity, and it is broadband infrastructure, which now is requisite. It's just necessary for meaningful membership in the economy and the society. And so people are being left behind on the cyber highway, and that's not fair. So I think that if we do get a meaningful infrastructure plan, that's got to be part of it. And I will certainly fight for that because I've got a lot of rural constituents who relate completely to what you're saying. Yesterday I was actually up in Frederick County in a fairly rural area. We just couldn't get any internet connection. So given the state of the news, that wasn't a totally bad thing, but I wouldn't want to live that way, So anyway, Richard, I hope to work with you on that and make sure that an infrastructure plan includes the idea, again, of a universal entitlement to participation in the internet.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Congressman-elect Raskin. I do not envy you. You have a lot of work ahead of you, but it feels good to have a friend on Capitol Hill. So definitely you all have the congressman's contact information, so please feel free to reach out to him and, just, again, you have a friend there. And so this concludes this episode of the Mid-Atlantic Federal Credit Union Small Business University. We invite you to join us back in 2017. We have huge announcements that are coming up, and so we look forward to seeing you on January 19th, where we will host the first and new CEO of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, David Petter, who will be sharing his role in economic development and how we as the small business community will be able to benefit as we move into the new year. Thank you for joining us. Happy holidays.